All right, today is 28 July 2014, and we are interviewing Staff Sergeant Matt Perroux.
Okay. Well, I joined the Air Force back in May 15th, 2007. I was 27 years old. I was one of the older guys in basic training. So that kind of brought in some weird dynamics when it came to basic training, because a lot of the guys that came in were young and didn't know quite how to act around other adults and other people the same age. So I stood out in the fact that I didn't stand out, if that makes sense. I did what I was told, got along with everybody, didn't make any waves, and got out without getting hurt emotionally. Okay. Now, once I got into basic training, I knew exactly what I wanted to do, because when you go to MEPS, the Military Entrance Processing Center, you pick a job, whatever they offer. But I did some research and figured out what I wanted to do. I loved electrical, I was good at it, and I loved aircraft. So I figured aircraft electrician, let's see what they've got. My ASVAB scores were good enough, so I asked them, so do you have any aircraft electrician jobs available? He said, absolutely, we do. We just don't know where yet. You'll find out when you go to basic training. So I go to basic training down in San Antonio, and I finally get the base that I picked, which was MacDill Air Force Base out of Tampa. I grew up in Orlando, so my family was there, so it was perfect. It was a perfect transition from being a civilian to military, active duty military. So it was a nice, smooth transition, had family there, had support. So I was there for about 3 years. While I was there, I ended up getting deployed end of 2008. Went to Southeast Asia, was there about 4 months. Enjoyed it, had a lot of fun. A lot of people don't like the thought of getting deployed, but I thought it was good because it was what I joined for. I joined to do something better than just working a normal 9 to 5 job. So get there, doing our job, and we're launching aircraft out because we're aircraft maintenance. We're fixing airplanes, we're generating aircraft. We see the air crew show up, and they tell us what they're going to be doing, whether it's doing a training mission or what kind of aircraft they're going to be refueling, where at, and so it was really nice to see that side of the mission and all the training that we went through between tech school and on-the-job training back at home station. We got to apply it in the field, and I think that's where it really came into play. So we're there, and we get this call. The commander brought us in and said, hey, there's some stuff going on in the Horn of Africa. There's pirates. They call them pirates because they take over ships and rob them and steal them and sometimes kill the passengers, depending on who's on it. This was off the Horn of Africa right in the beginning of 2009, and I launched out an aircraft to go support that mission. There was a hijacking that took place. The Navy was involved, and I launched out an aircraft to go take care of, so that they can go take care of the Navy guys that were monitoring the situation, because it was out in the middle of the ocean, right off the Horn. And come find out, the movie Captain Phillips was that mission. So once I saw the movie, I'm like, I look back at the date, and this is based off a true story. I'm like, that sounds familiar. I go back and look at the end of the movie credits was Captain Phillips, and the dates, I'm like, I launched the aircraft that went and supported all those jets that were flying around the ocean. So just the end of the movie, just recently that came out, I was like, cool, I was a part of that, because I launched our aircraft to go do that. So it was interesting. It was very humbling to say that I had a part of that. Yeah, not directly, but 2 or 3 steps away, and I was there. I helped. I helped a little bit. But got home after the deployment, got back to Tampa, and married my girlfriend now, Christina Perroux, my wife, and had a little girl. So after the deployment, I have a little girl, and her name's Olivia James Perroux, and a good kid, great kid. Right now she's 4, but at the time at MacDill, we were trying to raise her and try and bring her up in a nice area, and we just didn't want to do it there in Tampa, so I had the option to do a base of preference to to wherever I wanted to go. I can just put in for it. So okay, if there's a spot there, they'll put me there. So it was my first term enlistment under 4 years. Right after the deployment, had some money in the bank. Said, all right, let's do something different. I've already lived here all my life. She's lived in Tampa all her life. Let's go do something totally different. I spent my summers up in Washington State, up on the Colville Indian Reservation, with my grandparents. Spent 6 years straight. I knew the area for the most part and just loved it. Loved the area and wanted to move there. I knew there was a base up there with the same airframe that I'm already working, so I figured the transition might be easy. I don't have to learn a new aircraft. I can just move and be good to go. So I put in my paperwork. 3 weeks later, my orders dropped, and within 3 months, I was gone. Packed up the kid, packed up the wife, packed up the dog, and off we drove from Tampa all the way up here to Spokane to continue my enlistment, my new enlistment of another 4 years. From there, I continued working the aircraft, and it was funny because when I first got to the base, I went to go in process. Normally when you show up to a base, it depends on who the supervisors are. You just show up and just in civilian clothes, all right, hey, I'm here, just checking in. When do you want me to show up for work? I happened to show up in uniform because I was already here. I showed up a couple days early, and I show up to the shop, and the shop was so undermanned that nobody was qualified to do any work except me. I just happened to show up in uniform. I showed up not even in process yet, and they had to go fix a plane while I was there because I was the only one qualified. I had to go do an operational checkout on a system. I hadn't been on base maybe an hour, and I'm already working the flight line. It's like, oh, I see how this is going to go. But it was good because I felt like I was needed there. I'm like, all right, this will be a good fit. They like that I'm already qualified, and I can do the work. So I got out there and had some fun. I had no idea where I was because I didn't recognize anything, but it was good. So after I'm in process, I go to ALS, do the typical ALS Airman Leadership School, learn how to be a staff sergeant, because when I got to Fairchild, I already had a line number for staff. I made staff my first time, which was a nice little bump. Went to ALS. Doing ALS and completing it got me the rest of my credits for my community college of the Air Force. So, was it 4.5 years in? I was done with ALS, about ready to show on staff, and already with the CCAF. I was already set up for, what's it? Community College of the Air Force. Sorry. So I just got into Fairchild. I was there for a little bit. Went into ALS, finished it, Airman Leadership School, got my CCF, and at that point the runway had closed because it had to get repaved. There's only one runway at Fairchild, and they closed it so they can break up all the concrete and relay new concrete. They had to change the terrain and to make it a little bit smoother. So it was scheduled to be shut down for a year. With the flight line being shut down for a year, they have to move the aircraft to another location. Some were at local airport, some was at a remote airport just maybe an hour and a half away, so that we can continue our operations, but now we're split. We do some local missions, and then we have our heavy training at the further away airport. Between the two, our shop was split. So now we split our one shop that's at home into two, not including the deployed location that we normally run out in Southeast Asia. So now we have our normal unit split into three. When the runway closed, the operation in Libya, where I think his name is Muammar Gaddafi out of Libya, was fighting with his locals and the rebels. When all of that came out, we were tasked by AMC to deploy to a local base right outside of Libya so that we can help support the rebels. And it was a whole NATO mission that was all spun up between the French and the Spanish guys that were there, amongst other local NATO forces. We were tasked to go help refuel them. When AMC dropped the orders down, Fairchild was the first one off the ground and the first one to land at that base, and I was on that first plane that got there. So it was really cool to get a phone call that said, hey, pack your bags, get to work right now. Pack them for 4 months, kiss your family goodbye for now, and we don't know when you're coming back yet, minimum 4 months. I was like, all right, this is an actual deployment, because on the other deployments, you have 6 or 8 months that you know you're going to go. You have time to plan for it. this is one of those times that you can't plan for. You already better be prepared. Your uniforms better be straight. Your clothing ought to be straight. You should have luggage already ready to go. You know, within an hour of that phone call, I was on the other side of town. I got home, packed, and was on base, and we got on a plane and took off. 9 hours in the air, and when we landed, that's when we found out where we were. That was it was a humbling experience to not know where you're going, but to know that you're going to do some good somewhere. You know, you're called to do a job, do it, don't ask any questions. And when you get there, then we're filled in on what we're supposed to do and what our mission was. So being there, we knew exactly what we had to do, just didn't have the resources yet to do it. Because now we're trying to generate a base that doesn't exist into a fully operational air base with supplies and computer systems and logistics, and it went from one airplane to 55 airplanes on the ground in a matter of 3 days to get all those people in processed. I mean, the place we were at, we ran out of food, we ran out of just about everything, because the base was only operational with a handful of people. Now you drop 3,000 people in there in a matter of 3 days, you run out of food really fast. Peanut butter and jelly sandwiches, 3 days, three meals a day, bottled water, and that's about it. It was living rough for a couple of days until they were able to get some supplies in and get things running. But thinking about the old days, you know, World War I, World War II, where you're living off of rations in a war zone and you don't have shelter, you don't have food, it's like it really wasn't that bad. Peanut butter and jelly sandwiches, really, that's fine, I'll deal with it. We'll get our chicken sandwiches and our burgers here in a little bit. We'll survive. So I had to kind of bring that realization back around to some of the new kids that were used to having Pizza Hut and, you know, all the fast food in their lives. It's like, just get over it. You're eating a meal. Just be happy with that. But we were there. We finally got an operation going. I was there for about 2 months. Got the operation going. We were launching 28 to 30 jets every 12 hours, with 180,000 pounds of fuel every jet, and coming back with maybe 15,000 pounds of fuel coming back. So we offloaded a lot of fuel to a lot of NATO jets, and that's when I started realizing the importance of what a maintainer does on the aircraft, let alone the rest of the people involved that make that mission happen. The amount of fuel that we turned over and the amount of jets that we refueled in just a 12-hour period was incredible. Once I saw that and saw the actual operation firsthand, to know that I'm now responsible enough for my guys to get them trained up and to get them to fix the airplanes in a timely manner, to make sure we have supplies, make sure that's fixed right. Because if you miss a line, now you're screwing up things down the line. You have aircraft in the air that are waiting for gas, and if we don't make it there, they're going to have an emergency that we're going to be responsible for. And just the logistics of, if this aircraft breaks, now this one has to take it. Now if this one can't make it, that's all got to be planned ahead. And to see that firsthand made a lot more sense to me now that I saw it. Now you see all the little pieces coming together, because as a young airman you only see the little bits and pieces and you always question things. Now that when you see it in action, now you know why it's important to do this and to do that. You know, to go into the details of it for a layman, it's kind of difficult, but once it was just seeing it all together, seeing the whole picture, it really made me feel like I was a part of something a lot bigger than just fixing airplanes. You know, it wasn't fixing airplanes. It was saving the guys on the ground. When you start hearing other guys around base saying, yeah, we were out here, we did this, we did that, and we're so happy that we had a tanker in the air that supplied gas to our F-16 or F-18 or whatever it was. You know, when you see all those pieces come together and makes that whole story come together, it makes it really heartfelt, makes it real warm, you know. So we spent a couple months there, and the Air National Guard from the States was then activated to start taking our positions, to start replacing us, because we'd already been there, we set it up. Now they're going to start filling in for us so we can start rotating out. We'd already been there a few months, now the National Guard wanted to take over, so they ran it for a few months. I got to come back earlier in the summer. Now our runway was still closed, Remember, this is all in that same beginning of the year. Our runway closed, and I shipped out, came back a couple months later, and our runway was still closed. So now I'm splitting operations between our further location, hour and a half away, that we would spend 2 weeks at a time, 12-hour shifts, 14 or 15 days straight. No days off. You get there, you work 14 days straight, 15 days straight, and then you come home. Get 2 days off, and then you go back to work. Going back to work was at the local airport, not close to base. So everything we did, we'd meet at work, or we would meet at the airport, depending on what we had to do. If we had to pick up parts or pick up supplies, whatever it was, and go back out to the airport and do our local missions, our training missions, because we still had that mission to fulfill. So we did that for all summer. I went out to we call it our other deployed location, because it was 2 weeks at a time, 12-hour days every day. Did that 5 times, so I spent a total of 10 weeks out there doing that. Once that was all finished, I then got called back to go back to help support the mission for Libya. So I went back out at the end of the year for another 2 months, right before Christmas time. This was in November, October, November time. I spent 2 months out there, and then I was already familiar with the mission. I already knew what to do, knew where everything was. Now I was able to take control. Now I was expediting. Expediting meaning I drove the truck and I communicated back and forth with other drivers to get the maintenance completed on all the aircraft. We'd have a list of things to do, all the aircraft, everything that was flying. So okay, this broke, this is broken, this is broke. Now I have to communicate with each of the shops, the specialties, the hydraulics, the fuel cells, the communications, the guidance control systems guys, the electricians, the engine guys. I had to communicate with all those shop leads to say, okay, here's what's broke here, here's what's broke here, how do we fix this? Let me take you over here, let's fix that. You coordinate all those guys as an expediter to get all those things finished. So as a brand new staff sergeant, I was already doing that expediting. That at home, usually a tech sergeant or a master sergeant would do that position. So I took that leadership role earlier in my career to understand where my role was at home normally would have been. And now I have a lot more respect for those guys to know what actually goes into that role. And now I can explain it to the younger guys. Okay, this is why this is going on, this is why this happened. And I think it makes my job a lot easier, because now I understand what's going on behind the closed doors and all the things that happen on the upper end of the scale of the aircraft maintenance, between the production and the operations group, because all those guys have to talk to each other. The operations part of the house talks to production guys, because they're requesting aircraft. Well, the production guys have to make those aircraft green to supply it. It's a supply and demand thing. So, well, you only have this much fixed, work with that. And then they demand it, and they set up flying schedules, and if something comes down from AMC or whatever, they say, hey, we need 5 aircraft to fly, figure it out. And it's all up to those guys to figure out what 5 aircraft go. And it's a lot that comes together with it, and to see that portion of it, to say, okay, we're getting requested for 10 aircraft today. What do we have? How do we fix it? What kind of timelines are we looking at? Here's the timelines, okay. If something needs to get fixed, we know roughly how long it takes to get fixed. Is it actually going to take that long? We hope. As a maintainer, you try and do your best to get it fixed as quick as possible. However, there's things that's going to take longer, because you never know when you get into something. Something else may be broke, you may not have supplies to fix it, and so on. It happens. So towards the end of that mission for Libya, Fairchild was going to be the last people off the ground. They selected just about everybody else to clean up house, take all the bins back home, because our bins come with all our tools and supplies and aircraft parts, and we packed it all up, packed up the hangar, closed down operations. So now it's just a skeleton crew left. Me and about, I think it was 40 other people, maybe 30 other people on the ground that were doing just the bare minimums to keep the flying going, and just to be there in case they needed us. The NATO missions had slowed down. Now they said, okay, we're pretty much done. That was when Gaddafi was already taken and killed, however the story went, but he was killed one way or another. The threat was gone, we were no longer needed, so NATO said, all right, we're done. So we started pulling out, we sent jets home. So we spent about 2 weeks sending jets home with all the people and supplies, and me and the guys that I deployed with were still there, we were actually the last guys off the ground. I set up and was on the ground, had everybody on board, put everything else that we had on the plane. The rest of us, 30 people, were on the plane ready to take off, and I was on the ground launching it out, meaning I'm doing all the flight controls and making sure the crew is good upstairs, and let them start engines, and then they taxi it out from the spot by themselves. But when they were doing their pre-operational checkouts on the aircraft, they had power on and found a system wrong, and it happened to be one of my systems in my specialty as an aircraft electrical journeyman at this point. It was one of my systems that was wrong. Went up to go find out what it was, and I was able to fix it enough the correct way to get it home, but not enough to cause a system problem. Still worked properly, but it wasn't 100%. Their aircrew commander said, all right, we'll take it as long as you're good with it, I'm good with it, we'll fix it right when we get home. And I fixed it, he was good with it, and if not, it was going to be about 2 or 3 days because we had no supplies. We sent it all home. And I saved that aircraft from being stuck there for 2 or 3 days waiting for parts. When everybody was on board ready to go home, it's like, all right, we'll fix it, we'll get it home. So I was able to get it done, went upstairs, and we taxied out and flew home. And we flew home, parked, and we're like, all right, we're done. Because when you're in a location like that, you're not working just 12-hour shifts. You're getting there half hour to 45 minutes early, you're staying an hour or so later, and then you have to go get food. So you're working 16, 18 hours a day, 7, 8 days straight in a row, and then you might have a day off, you might get off early a little bit. So your job, and especially out there, it was a job. But we had fun with it as well, because we knew what we were doing, we knew how we were doing it, and we knew we were making an impact, especially seeing the amount of fuel and the amount of lines that we were running. A line being an aircraft sorting, a line number is aircraft number taking off. So we have so many lines a day. We saw that we were actually making an impact. It wasn't just doing training missions that we do locally here just for the air crew so they can get used to it. There it was work, and we actually got it done. So it was good. That was Operation Odyssey Dawn, is what that was called for Libya, is what we were a part of. Now there was a few other side missions that were there, but I don't remember quite offhand of what they were. I'd have to look them up. But yeah, I got home from that, and the aircraft, the flight line was just about being finished from the construction, and went through the winter a little bit, and after the spring showed up, a position opened up for a field training instructor, also called FTD. The Field Training Detachment is sponsored by Shepherd in Wichita Falls, Texas. So out of Texas, there's a training facility where we go for aircraft maintenance. There's a small unit there that we're part of, that this training detachment has detachments across the globe at different air bases to train people that come from one aircraft to another so they get used to working that airframe. For instance, if somebody was coming from Hill Air Force Base and they're working F-16s or F-15s, whatever's out there, and they get orders to come to Fairchild. Well, Fairchild only has tankers. That individual would have to go through an FTD for their specialty. If they're an electrician, they would come to my classroom. I would teach them all the electrical systems, all the environmental systems, being pressurization, air conditioning, heating, fire control, fire suppression, and oxygen systems. Those are my systems. So that person, that's still my AFSC, my Air Force job code, if you want to just call it that. He would come from Hill and he'd come to our base. He would come through FTD, so he'd learn all the systems. We show him how the systems work, how to troubleshoot them, how to replace things, how the wiring diagrams are set up so that they can go into the flight line and be a productive member of the shop. Instead of just kind of learning on the job, you actually go through and you learn everything about the aircraft as much as you can in a short period of time. Because you've already been on one aircraft, you know how books work, and you know the basics of being in that position. Now you just need to know the aircraft. It's a little bit different than coming from right out of tech school into the job, because you get some on-the-job training, you get fed a little bit at a time. With an FTD, you should already know the basics. Now you're coming to learn specifically what this aircraft does. So that's what I do now, is I teach at an FTD, the 373rd Detachment 13. And that is right out of Fairchild, and I teach electrical and environmental systems now. I also, during this position, it is a special duty assignment. It's 4 years. Controlled tour, that means you don't deploy. You're not part of the aircraft maintenance unit that I was a part of at Fairchild. Now we consider ourselves Texas. When you walk in the front doors, we're a detachment of Texas, so everything we do is run by the 373rd at Shepherd. So we're part of Shepherd. We're actually part of AATC instead of AMC, because Fairchild is AMC run through Scott Air Force Base. It's just how everything's split up. So you walk in our front doors and you say, all right, hey, you're in Texas now, you go by our rules. So it's kind of a running joke, but technically that's how it is. All of our commanders and our first sergeants and everything is all down in Shepherd. We don't answer to anybody on that base except for Shepherd. Out of respect for locals, we will, we'll handle things, but legalities, it all goes back to Shepherd. So I joined that position. I was the only one qualified. There was only 2 people that applied for, and I was the only one qualified because of my CCF that I got the previous year, the Community College of the Air Force, my 2-year degree. Because in an FTD, you teach college level courses. You get credit for college, and those college credits are good on the civilian side. So to teach a college level course, you have to be accredited by certain accreditations, and you have to be taught a certain way. You can't just start teaching these courses just because you know it. You have to be taught a certain way. You have to teach a certain way in the classroom. You have to do things a certain way in order to do it right per the Air Force and per college and how the college accreditation works. So I had to go to a course down at Shepherd and learn how to become an instructor, learn how to speak, learn how to get your point across, learn how to form sentences, learn how to stand in front of the board without blocking it, and all those little quirks that a lot of people don't think about. And verbal distractors, I'm horrible at verbal distractors. I have the ums, the uhs, but I'm working on it. I'm aware of them, so I practice them a little bit more. But besides the point, it's a 4-year controlled tour, and I teach those systems. Now within that training detachment, there are other courses that can be taught that are not college credit. The ones that I teach specifically is soldering. I teach basic soldering because I'm an electrician, so they had me do soldering, and aircraft servicing, which is just a training session. Aircraft servicing is for air crew that are new to the airframe, that have done some training so far. They will come to our class, and I will show them how to put fuel on the aircraft, how to put oil in the aircraft, how to check things, how to do some of the basic servicing, so in case they get stuck somewhere, they talk to the air crew, the pilots, the co-pilots, and the boom operator. If they land somewhere, if they had to divert somewhere, and they had to put gas in the plane, I teach them how to do that. At least the very basics, so they know where things are, the basic safeties, what to look for, how to do the job safely without hurting themselves or hurting the aircraft. These are things that they can reference back to the books on how to do it, but if they see it firsthand and put hands on, it helps them out a lot. They can at least remember, okay, oh, this went here and this went there. I teach that course. Now, there's a few of us around the detachment that teach that same course, because about once a month we'll have a group of guys come through, air crew. They'll come through, it could be pilots, co-pilots, boomers, could be people that have been on the aircraft for years before, went to another base for a couple years and then came back to Fairchild. They may already know this stuff, but every time that somebody's assigned to the base, they go through the course. Just a refresher. Very informal. I just teach them the basics, and sometimes if I have time, I'll go into more specific things, and I tell them up front, hey, I'm an electrician. These are the systems that I know. I teach this stuff. If you have questions about it, let me know, just after class, and we'll go through more about it. So during one of these courses, this young pilot came up to me. His name was Tyler Voss, and he said, hey, I've got this little project. It's a little experimental airplane. And he's like, I'm looking to redo the avionics in it. He's like, would you be interested in helping me out? I'll pay on the side, or we'll work something out. And he's flipping through his phone, and he's showing me pictures, and this thing looks like a wreck. It's old. I say old. It's only about 12 years old, but it's been flown. It's been flown a lot. It's been used. It's dirty, it's mismatched, half of it's not painted, but it flew, and he loved it. He took it everywhere. He wanted to redo all the gauges in it, put all new avionics. He wanted to go from a visual flight rules aircraft to an instrument flight rules, to where he can run, run approaches and do all the stuff that normally an aircraft that size wouldn't do, but he wanted it. I'm like, all right, well, he was into toys. He had dirt bikes, he had motorcycles, he had little sports cars, he had a big old truck, he had all these little toys. Fortunately, he wasn't married and he didn't have kids, so whatever he made off of his temporary duty assignments and his deployments and stuff just went into his toys. Lovable guy. He was on soccer teams, and basically you meet this guy and you talk 2-3 words to him, he's your best friend. He'll give you anything. But he came to me after the class and he asked me if I was interested. He's like, well, I'll tell you what, come out to the airfield, I'll show you the plane. I'll take you up. We'll go do some barrel rolls and some loops. I'm like, oh man, it's like I'm getting too old for that stuff. I'm 30 almost, and he wants to do barrel rolls. I'm like, all right, well, we'll go out there and check it out. It's 15 degrees in Spokane, it's December. We go out to the airfield. He meets me out there. We roll this thing out of the hangar. It's dark. The hangar is not very well lit. It's dusk out, and he said, all right, let's go up and fly. And I look at this thing and I'm like, you sure about this? And he's like, oh, yeah, I fly it all the time. I said, okay. We get in it and it doesn't start. He finally gets it started. He's trying to put jumper cables off his truck because he killed the battery. It's so cold out. Puts the jumper cables on it. He reverses the polarity. Blows up the jumper cables. And I'm like, holy cow, what are you doing? I'm an electrician, I should know this, but he's just rushing around trying to get this thing started. Finally gets it started. We go up, cruising around. Now, of course, at 5,000 feet, at 15 degrees on the ground, it's below zero up, and there's no heat on the airplane. You're sitting in an aluminum can, freezing. I've got layer after layer on me. I've got insulated boots on. I am freezing, but having a blast. He's taking me around. We're going around Mount Spokane. You can see the slopes all lit up, and we finally land, and he's like, all right, let me show you the parts I want to put on this plane. We go into this little room. He pulls a box out of his truck, and he lays out all these equipment, instruments and displays and radios. He's like, I don't know how to do any of this stuff. I just bought it on eBay. Some of it's used. I don't even know if some of this stuff works, but I really want to put it on the airplane. It's like, okay. I'm pretty resourceful when it comes to figuring stuff out. It's like, I tell you what, I'll make you a deal. It's like, I'd like to try and get my ANP, airframe and power plant license, to work on aircraft. It's what I want to do as a civilian. When I get out of the Air Force, when I'm done, retire, get out and work on airplanes. I love it. I love doing it. He's like, okay, I tell you what, you help me with this, I'll buy you all the books and all the study material, and whatever else you need to help you through the process. All right, we can do that. Just thinking it was only going to take me a few months to build this panel, which it did. It didn't take me long to build the panel itself. So on a sunny day, we go out to this aircraft to look at it, and I see all the damage that's actually done to it. The canopy's broken in 2 places. The fiberglass is broken. There's sheet metal that's cracked. There's all kinds of things. I start looking at this thing, and I was like, man, this needs a lot of work to make it look like how he wants. He was going to do all that stuff. I was like, that's fine. You need to do this, this, and this to actually do it. Here's how you do it. He said, all right, sounds good. So I'm at home. I take all these avionics, and I take this panel, this brand new blank panel, lay it out, print out life-size printouts of all the things that he has so he can rearrange it so we can make it how he wants it. Right? It's his airplane, right? Lays it out. Now he's placing it. He's like, all right, that's what I want. Let's do it. So I start cutting it out. I start mounting all the avionics in it, put the gauges in it, and bench test it at the house. But to bench test it, all I got to do is just put power to it. So I got a battery and a power supply for it, and I told him to come over. I was like, look, I'm going to show you everything that's connected. I'm going to show you how I wired it. You're going to turn it on because it's all your stuff. I didn't want to fry anything. I was confident in my wiring. I was like, but you're going to hit the power switch and you're going to turn it on and everything light up. It's one of those things. It's a bench that let the customer turn it on. All right, so he came over and he's in his flight suit. He just got done flying for the day or whatever he was doing. He comes over and he comes down to my basement where my shop is. And he flips it on, and he gets all light up, and he starts laughing. He's like, man, I can't believe how cool it is. It's just everything lit up, and he's like, I can't believe this is actually going to be cool. It's going to work. It's going to be nice. He's like, I'm so glad you're doing this for me. It's like, cool. He's like, however, I'm getting deployed in about 3 weeks. I'm like, all right, not a big deal. I can work without you. I was like, all I got to do is get in there and strip the wiring out and just replace and hook everything up to the aircraft. I got to rehook the antennas and rewire some of the wings, run some wire out to the wings for the new antennas for this new system. So not a big deal. I know how that stuff hooks up. So he deploys, and I'm stripping out the aircraft. I'm pulling all the old wiring out, because whoever wired the aircraft used very cheap wiring. Cheap as in not very well built. The insulation is soft, very low heat melting point. You know, probably 150 degrees and the insulation is going to melt off. Very, very poor type of wiring. Connections weren't done very well at all. Even if they were, they didn't last very long. Not very well insulated wiring wise. So I had to go through and just rip everything out. I just took everything out. It was all automotive style wiring. Very, like, just copper based. Anything that's bare copper is going to corrode. It's going to get oxidized. So as an electrician, I know I'm going to fix this right. I'm going to do it right. I told them, look, I'm going to strip the entire airplane out. Ripped every last wire of that airplane as much as I could and just started from scratch. Redid all the connections, redid the power supply system, redid everything. All the lighting, everything got replaced. And one of the things that he wanted to redo the power supply system for was because when we were flying that one night, we had to turn our lights on. You turn on your nav lights so you can fly around. Well, he turned the nav lights on, and the tower started screaming at him because he lost his transponder signal. There was only an 8 amp generator on the aircraft. There was no alternator for an actual power supply. The aircraft was using so much power, it just lost signal to actually transmit the transponder signal to the tower. And he's like, oh, it's fine. He shuts the lights off. Oh, okay, I got you. Tower, I got you. All right. But of course, he's flying around with no nav lights on and no landing lights, nothing. Just flying around dark. And I just started laughing. I'm like, man, this guy's going to kill me up here. So, but all right, we get on the ground, and that's when I stripped everything out. Now I knew why there wasn't enough power to run the transponder, because there wasn't enough power being generated. I mean, you're already killing the battery, and now the generator just pushing out every little ounce it's got. 8 amps just isn't much. So we get it landed, we pull it into the hangar. Now he's going into a new hangar. It goes from that dark, dirty old hangar, because it was dripping sap from all the lumber that was up in the ceiling, just the rafters that were up there. And we finally pull it out of there. We put it in this nice new hangar. Now this is the EAA, the Experimental Aircraft Association. This hangar, well, nice, well lit. They put in all new lights in there, heated. It was nice. I was like, all right, this is where you want to do a build, to redo all this stuff. So we pull it in there, stick it in the spot, and he's like, all right, let's do it. I was like, what do you mean? I was like, let's go ahead and strip it out. And I know I'm kind of jumping around a little bit, but after that first flight and all that stuff was dead, we started ripping it out, and that's when I saw the wiring that was damaged and made that decision to go back. So anyway, he deploys, jumping ahead a few months here, he deploys, and I finish stripping out all the wiring because of what happened and all the wiring that I saw that was just bad. I mean, I was literally taking connections and just pulling them apart, just splices. Half the systems weren't even through fuses, it was just directly to power and just always hot all the time, and you don't want to have that. You want to have some kind of protection on your electrical systems. So he deploys, he's gone for about 2-3 months, and he's emailing me back and forth. He's sending me pictures of seats that he wants to put in, and he sends me emails of different parts he wants to put on the aircraft. And I say, hey, this is the stuff that we need. I need to order this stuff. I'll send it to him, a link to the website, to the aircraft supply stores online, and then he'll order it and just put my address on there. And then May 3rd, Friday, we had a detachment function at our unit. We're going to have a fishing tournament. So we take all the little boats out, we go fishing. We close down the detachment, nobody's teaching. So all right, alternate duty, go out fishing that day. And that morning, I go to my friend's house to go pick up the boat and pick up the rest of the guys out there. And my friend's like, hey, we just lost a tanker. I'm thinking locally. So what happened? He's like, no, it was in the deployed location. So right out in Kyrgyzstan. I'm like, okay. And I'm sitting there thinking, I'm like, well, do we know who was on it? They knew until I was out there. And at this point, he told me kind of what his schedule was, what his flying schedule was, because they have pretty much set times when they're going to fly. And I knew that the time that it was currently was roughly the time he would have been flying. And I'm like, and I just sat there for a minute. And immediately I went to my phone, a smartphone, and emailed him. I was like, hey, please tell me you're not on that plane. And that was the last time I ever sent him an email, because 2 days later is when the names came out, and he was on that plane. And the names came out while I was working on his plane at the hangar down at Phelps Field. My daughter was with me, Olivia, because I always brought her out to the hangar with me to give Mom a break. So she's running around the hangar, and I'm tinkering, I'm doing whatever it was. I was working on the engine somewhere because I had to redo some of the baffling and some of the sheet metal I had to redo, plus all the rewire on the engine anyway. So I'm redoing some of that stuff. And my friend back at work texted me the names of the people that were going to crash. And that's when I just kind of set everything down, and I'd never lost anybody that close to me as somebody that I just talked to literally the day before about something I'm currently working on. I'm like, all right. So I went to local hardware store, bought a flag, and just put it over the wing of his plane back at the hangar, and had them type up a little note saying where he was, and said he's gone, and just kind of a quick little blurb, and then just left it on the aircraft for the EAA so that the guys, because there were guys coming in there all the time. They all were friends with them, always talked with them, and had a good time. You know, they'd buy him drinks, whatever. But put that on the wing, and I closed up shop, shut the hangar, and just went home, and just kind of sat and thought about, what am I going to do now? You know, it's like, he's not my brother, he's not family, but he was a friend of mine, you know, and there's nothing that I could do personally to fix it. But you know, seeing the reaction of losing an aircraft of our own, an air crew of our own. The aircraft itself was part of McConnell's out in Kansas, but the air crew was our air crew. And you know, the news came out, so it was all over the local news, and just seeing his face pop up on the TV all the time, every time we watched the news, and updates. Oh, we don't know who it is yet, and then they finally released the names, and then his family came up for the memorial. Spokane had put on a memorial downtown, plus the one we had on base. And I introduced myself a few days after everything happened, because everybody knew who I was that Tyler was friends with. They knew me as just Matt out of his air refueling squadron. They all knew me as Matt. They all knew what I was doing to his plane, because I'm the one that was doing all the electrical work at the time. But I did it all at my house. I was never at the hangar. Tyler was always at the hangar doing all the airframe stuff, taking stuff out and painting it and cleaning and whatever. So I was never really at the hangar very much when he was around. So everybody knew me as just Matt. They didn't know who I was, they didn't know where I worked. They knew I was on base somewhere. And Matt's a pretty common name, so you can't just look me up. So that Monday after the crash, I went to the AMU where he worked, where all the pilots and the co-pilots and boomers all work when they're not flying. Went up there and I just started asking around. The first guy I came up to happened to be one of his really good friends, Manny. And I said, sir, I just introduced myself. Look, I've been helping Tyler work on his plane. I've got his panel at my house. Here's my information. I just want you to give this information to his parents so they know who to get a hold of, because I'm the one that's got all his parts. I got all his stuff at my house. I got cowlings, I've got parts, I've got all kinds of stuff at my house that I was working on as part of his plane. So just give my information just so they have it. It doesn't have to be now, I don't care, just let me know. And then we'll get a hold, just have him get a hold of me whenever. And he grabs me and he goes, hey everybody, I found Matt, running through the hallways. Because they've been all looking for me. The entire unit was looking to find out who I was. And when I finally introduced myself, by the time I finished that sentence, he grabbed me and pulled me through the building. And was like, hey, I found Matt. I finally found Tyler's friend that has been working on his plane. And I was like, oh, hey, everybody kind of got together. I mean, we're talking like 24 people. Oh, man, I'm so glad to see you. I'm so glad you came up, man. We've been looking for you. Had no idea who you were. And I'm like, yeah, I was just like shocked. I'm like, all this energy all of a sudden. It was real quiet and somber. When you walk into a unit, they just lost a crew. Very, very quiet, very somber. But when I showed up, it was like an eruption. I'm like, holy crap, it's just I just wanted to pass on my information. That's it. And so we talked a little bit. He's like, "Oh, sit down, pull up a chair," and started talking, and we just kind of just shared some stories. I'd only known him for a few months, maybe 6 or 8 months, and they're telling me all the other stuff, and so, "Oh yeah, his parents are coming up, and you're gonna meet them. Don't worry about it." And because of how much I've already put into his plane already, 4 or 5 months worth of work so far. And once I saw his family lives down in San Antonio, Texas, Marcy and Wayne, and his brother and his sister all came up for the memorial, and they wanted to throw a barbecue at the hangar where Tyler's plane is, down at Phelps Field. And that's where I finally got to meet them one-on-one, was able to talk a little bit about it, because it's a little smaller of a community there. So we started talking, and I showed them the airplane of what we were doing, and they had seen it when he flew it down to Texas. It was the last time they saw it. And they knew it was a pretty rough airplane. But I told them what the plans were and what we wanted to do. And at this point, I wanted to give something back. I wanted to give something. A family loses a family member like that. I was like, you know what, tell you what, I'm going to finish this plane. Don't care how long it's going to take. Don't care how much money it's going to take. I'm going to finish it. I'm going to dedicate so much time, so much energy per week to get this thing done. So it might be 6 months, might be a year, I don't know. And that was 5 or 6 days after the crash last year. And so far, it is July 28th. Almost a year and a half after the crash, and it will be going home in about a month, roughly a month to 5 weeks. It's planning on going home. It hasn't flown yet, but I've redone the electrical system, redone the canopy, I've redone the fiberglass. All the fiberglass pieces have been fixed, remade somewhere along the lines. I've touched it somehow, trying to repair it. Sheet metal work, cracks, structural issues I've fixed. And all this stuff is being inspected by certified A&Ps to make sure that what I'm doing is correct, along with going by the manufacturer of the kit itself, because it's a kit plane, making sure everything's good, make sure it's test flown, and then it's going to go home. And Manny, one of Tyler's friends, is going to fly this plane back to Texas, and so far they want me to fly with it, which is going to be great. I think it'll be great closing the project. But so far I've spent probably 1,500 to 1,600 hours over the past 15 months, along with a couple $1,000 of my own money and supplies and materials, and my wife, time away from my family. I tried to split it up to where I'm going to spend 1 day at home, 1 day at the hangar, 1 day home. Anytime I have off is going to be split 50-50. And I talked to the wife about doing it. She said, just do whatever you got to do. It's fine. It's going to be a great cause. And then I just did it. I just started working, just was doing it on my own. And then word around base started going around that I was doing this. And, oh, Tyler had this, because people at the unit knew who I was, knew that I was doing this. So the base got involved. The wing commander finally heard about it, and he wanted me to do a story with the base paper. And then local news stories started hearing about it, so they wanted to interview me on that, which has been great. The publicity's been okay. I'm not much one for spotlight, but it's good that as people are acknowledging that I'm doing this, but it's not why I did it. I did it to give a whole piece of Tyler back to his family. And I felt so horrible to have a half an airplane to give back to a family that's been split. When I had the power to fix it, and I had the power to complete it, and I was the only one, because I had all the systems in my head of how everything was supposed to go, and I couldn't just I couldn't hand pieces of an airplane back to his family. I just felt wrong on all levels. So I'm like, you know what? I'm gonna fix it. You guys will get back an airplane. It's gonna be 100% safe. Everything's gonna be functional on it. Just let me do it, and we'll keep in contact. And I guess at that point they were okay with it. They were fine with me doing it. But until the 1 year annual, the anniversary of the crash, when they came up here for the memorial, they saw it almost 100% complete. And that's when they knew how much actually went into the project, because everything that's been changed. most people now, when they see the plane before and after, it's almost unrecognizable. Still the same airplane, but a lot of it has changed because of what I've done to it. And it was how I know how he would have wanted. So that, to me, that's what I can give back. You know, yeah, some people say it's honorable to do that, and I'm sure it is. I mean, looking back, yeah, it was a heck of an undertaking. And if I knew that it was going to take me a year and a half, almost 2 years to complete it, would I do it again? Probably. You know, because like I said, the reason I did it wasn't for publicity. It wasn't to get, you know, acknowledgement for it. It was to give back that whole piece of him back to his family. And yeah, I'm glad I did it. And right now, it's going to be going back home in about 5 to 6 weeks. It'll be going back home, and then that chapter will be closed. And then some other opportunities from that have opened up, career-wise, that has gotten my name out there, and the type of work that I do and the work ethic that I have. Other people have noticed and have picked me up on side jobs and say, hey, you know, I saw you did this. I saw you in the news. Hey, we got a hold of the president of the EAA. You know, I'd like to hire you to do this and do that, which in turn adds to my A&P and my resume for doing civilian aircraft, which in a way he gave back to. And he was able to come through on his word, so it worked. It just took a little bit longer than I thought. But right now, I'm trying to finish this project, and I've got some other, I've been hired to build an entire new airplane from a kit, and I'm starting it as soon as I get done with Tyler's. And then that whole new airplane is going to be started. I'll take log of it, make sure all my hours are good, and then I'll get my A&P out of doing that, along with other work that I've done as well. So right now, the airplane's still sitting at the EAA at Phelps Field, and it'll be going home soon. And that's all I'm waiting on. But Air Force career-wise, so far I've had a fairly busy one, from what I can tell, comparing my life and my career to other people that I work with. Some people have been in 10, 12 years and are just now doing some things that I've already done. And I think that gives me an advantage to career-wise, to experiences that I've had so far, and what I'm willing to do for somebody and what I'm not willing to do. Hopefully the Air Force will keep me, and I hope there's always a spot for me. So if I can stay, I'll stay and make a career of it, and then I'll move on to the civilian world after that. But so far, that's it.
Very good. Well, Matt, thank you for your story. As like you said, you've done a lot in a very short period of time, and I wish you continued success in your future years in the Air Force.
I hope so.
All right.
Thank you.
Well, thank you for your time.
All right, thank you.